Ryan's here.
Ryan's
There he
here.
is. Hey, Ryan. Jeff, whatever you did during committee, we could hear you pretty well. So do that again.
Well, I've got my earplugs plugged in and I'm literally holding my microphone up to my mouth like this.
Well, you could really hear you well.
I was kind of enjoying you not hearing me. It's like the first time in my life somebody told me I wasn't loud enough.
Well, you're not the only one that enjoyed not hearing you.
Yeah, but I got a phone call complaining that they couldn't hear him.
That it could.
That they couldn't.
Oh,
When was that?
Bill Cox called me sometime last week.
last week I got the same call.
Yeah, asking if it was him or if it was you. And I said, well, it just depends if Jeff has his headset on or not.
Well, if there's 14 people on here and there's only one person who can't hear, it's probably not him. It's probably that one person. I'm just saying.
You're honorable. You're looking good. Hi, Mayor.
Hi there. How's everybody tonight? Good.
Doing good, doing good.
Just snow just keeps on drifting. Boy.
Keeps on coming. Well, it's been a pretty good winter so far, though.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate.
Yeah. So, Spence, you ready?
Yes.
I've got 6:59 here, so we'll give it a minute and get going.
Spencer, you doing a flag?
What?
Spencer, are you doing the flag?
Yeah, I've got the flag ready. I almost forgot it, but I remembered.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting February 1st, 2021 of your Newark City Council to order. Janine, please call the roll.
Mr. Bub?
Here.
Mr. Fennell?
Here.
Ms. Hall?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. Labutus?
Here.
Mr. Lang?
Present.
Mr. Marmee?
Present.
Mr. Rath?
Here.
Mr. Barker?
Present.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
All right, we have everybody here or present this evening. Next, we have the invocation by Mr. Blake.
May you bow your heads. To you, O God, we give the glory and praise. We thank you for bringing us all together once more to do the people of Newark's business. God, watch over our police officers and paramedics and firefighters during these icy conditions, and give strength to our workers which clear our streets. May all in the sound of my voice stay healthy and safe during this health pandemic that we all find ourselves in. And may we all go with God's love. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Blake. Very nice. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Next, we have caucus. That's a time for council to discuss anything pertaining to the agenda tonight. Do we have anything? Okay. We move on to the minutes of our January 19th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion to approve those? Motion by Mr. Labutus, second by Mr. Barker. All those in favor, give me a thumbs up, please. Those opposed? That passes. Thank you. We have no appointments this evening. We have two reports tonight from standing committees, one from finance and one from service. Without objection, those will be received and filed. We have no reports tonight from city officials. We have several communications. We have some from folks talking about their opposition to the River Road project. We have also a petition against the River Road project. Speaking of that, I will just say this in case there's anyone listening out there. We did get a letter from Connie Kalina, the attorney for the Corridor Development Company. Basically, the letter, it got here too late to make the agenda, but the letter says, on behalf of the Corridor Development Company, I request that the rezoning application scheduled for 2/9/2021 before the Planning Commission be tabled until the next scheduled meeting. We're reviewing site and infrastructure plans and questions posed at the public hearing and need more time to adequately complete our review. So that will not be on the Planning Commission in February. It won't be on the Planning Commission until March. So if anyone's out there concerned about that, there you go. Next, in the High Division of Liquor Control, we have a transfer application from Mid-Ohio Sports to Dawn and Sue's Pizza. We have a letter questions about regarding the Newark zoning code and the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we have another letter about a barking dog complaint. So those are in the file. Next on the agenda, we have comments from citizens. That's time for you to be heard. This is not a debate with council, but this just is your opportunity to speak. If we have anyone, if you will turn your video on so I can see you, give me a little wave and we will start. Hi, Nancy. Yes, go ahead. You can be first. Yes, give us your name and address for the record.
Thanks. Good evening. Nancy Waylu, 7441 Stewart Road, Newark. I just wanted to, on behalf of the Newark Homeless Outreach, I want to thank the City of Newark Firefighters Local Union 109, and a special thank you to their union president, Kevin Garwick, for their support. Last Saturday, the firefighters prepared and brought down food for the Newark Homeless Outreach. We served over 90 residents of Newark. One firefighter brought his wife and his 2 young sons, and they jumped in and helped out. And it was just an amazing act of kindness to see everybody come together. The union has also donated some warm weather gear that we've been passing out the last several weeks. So I just want to publicly acknowledge and thank the firefighters for what they're doing and supporting the Newark Homeless Outreach. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Well, hang on. Just pulled my earbuds out, sorry. Mr. Crawford, would you like to speak?
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, so I'll just say it's been a while since I've commented.
Name and address for the record.
Oh, yes, Dirt. Sorry. Daniel Crawford, 163 South 2nd Street, Newark, Ohio.
Thank
It's
you.
been a while.
Exactly.
So it's been almost a year. Yes, and I want to thank you. Of course, I know Spencer Barker, from what I've read in the minutes, he's helping to manage all this. So want to say I appreciate that. I appreciate all the efforts for keeping everything safe that I've seen. I talk to Dee Hall a lot when she comes into Giant Eagle, so she's always very nice. And we talked before about the safety precautions. Also, I keep in touch with Jeremy Blake and a lot of the others, a lot of you guys I see coming into city council all the time. So the reason why I wanted to speak up is, been quite a few things that have been going on as of late. And, I read like all the minutes for the past year that I've missed within the span of last month. So that was a lot of reading. Anyways, about, 6 years ago when I first ran for city council, I had brought up, one of the things I campaigned on at the time was the need for sidewalks. And it was just so tragic what happened on Londondale Parkway. And that's, when I saw that, it's one of those things where, when I talked about that, I always feared that something like that would happen. Of course, my big fear was like school children being hit too, but I mean, that's just something I saw when I was campaigning back then, and each time I have campaigned, and it's just a major security issue. So I think that, or safety issue rather, and I think that within the city limits, every neighborhood should have sidewalks. I get why people don't like sidewalks in their neighborhoods, but tragedies like what we saw, what was it, last month? I think it was like right before Christmas. That should be a sign like we need to do this. And I know it's not going to be cheap and it's not going to be done overnight, but something we should work towards as a city. The other thing I wanted to mention was I was pretty disheartened about this investigation against Marsha Phelps, which I'm not like the biggest Marsha Phelps fan. But at the same time, I just, I saw she had an independent investigation. And I can definitely respect having an independent investigation against that, but it's just kind of weird how all this came up. And I see, the expenditure of money towards this seeming like there's like no limit to it whatsoever. But I see that as, it's weird because when we brought up the whole issue about the gazebo and how it was like taken away at like in the middle of the night, and how we still don't know how officially those dollars were spent or where they came from. We kind of have suspicions, but we never investigated that. But yet we're investigating this thing with Marshall Phelps. And also there was this whole weird thing where there was money appropriated for changing how city council chambers look to make it like safer, more secure. And that was changed like sort of like in the middle of the night too. So my point is we're always talking about, or at least the city's always talking about how we don't have money for this or that, but then we're throwing money away at, these investigations and stuff, or at least one investigation that seems like it's not going to bring up anything extra from what we already learned from the independent one, or at least I absolutely hope not. So anyways, that's just a small concern. I respect like that desire, to look more into this, but it's just kind of weird how that came up out of nowhere, seemingly how it sort of emerged when there was a request for funds for, raising the pay for some of the people in the county clerks, not county, but the clerk of courts office. But I won't be able to stay on to watch everything. I'm going to read the minutes for this later on, so I'll definitely pay attention to what people say in response. I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and everyone, I hope you stay safe, especially with the weather out there. So thank you.
Hang on. Thank you, Daniel. Good to see you again. Anyone else for this first section? Okay. We're going to go on to we have two public hearings this evening. The first one is 2035. So we're going to open this public hearing. Janine, would you please read the public hearing?
The ordinance, is that what?
Just read the section that says about the public hearing. It's almost the same as the ordinance, yes.
I'm not sure what you want.
Well, you can go ahead and just read the ordinance.
Yeah. Okay. Ordinance number 20-35 by Mr. Rath and Mr. Marmee. An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 298 Bell Vista Avenue, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of LC Limited Commercial District to Single Family Residence RH High Density District zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
Do we have anyone that would like to speak for or against this public hearing? Again, this is your chance because when we close the public hearing, we're going to read it again and vote. So if anyone would like to speak for or against? Anyone would like to speak for or against? Just turn your camera on so I can recognize you. See anybody, Spence?
No.
Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Janine, you want to read 2035 and we'll go ahead and vote.
Ordinance number 20-35 by Mr. Rath and Mr. Marmee, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 298 Bell Vista Avenue, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of LC Limited Commercial District to Single Family Residence RH High Density District zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
You've heard the second reading of 20-35. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 20-35.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath,
Second.
second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 20-35? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes,
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yes.
Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
20-35 passes 10-0. Now we're going to have another public hearing this evening. It is on resolution 20-37. I'm going to open the public hearing. Janine, if you'd please read the public hearing.
Ordinance number 20-37 by Mr. Rath. An ordinance amending Article 135 display signs and outdoor advertising NCO Chapter 1294 of the Zoning Code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
Is there anyone who would like to speak for or against on this public hearing? Again, this is your opportunity. Would anyone like to speak for or against? Okay, we're going to close the public hearing. Janine, if you would read 20-37.
Ordinance number 20-37 by Mr. Rath, an ordinance amending Article 135, display signs and outdoor advertising, NCO Chapter 1294 of the Zoning Code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
You've heard the second reading of 20-37. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 20-37.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 20-37?
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Lang?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to make a motion to amend 20-37 to adopt the recommendation of the Planning Commission and add, I guess the easiest way to say, and add, except that in a district zone, commercial or industrial, such sign shall not exceed 32 square feet to section G1 of the legislation.
Second that motion.
I'm sorry.
I will second that motion.
Motion to amend by Mr. Lang, second by Mr. Rath. I believe everybody has the amended version in your email or should have it. Is there any discussion on the amendment?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Mr. Lang?
Yeah, thank you. Just clarifying, I think the packet, we usually have like a 20-37A, so that's why I
Right.
proposed it the way I did there. But
Thank you.
you know, originally this legislation was brought to make our our temporary sign legislation constitutional based on some complaints that we've received. I think this has been discussed, but I'm happy to discuss it further. We did have a recommendation from the zoning or from the engineering department that I think was passed through Planning Commission that we make an exception for commercial or industrial zoned areas consistent with kind of the size of signs on that property. And the law director felt that as long as we continue to make all of these restrictions content neutral, so they apply no matter what's on the sign, that it would pass muster with the First Amendment and be something we could continue to enforce. But as we discussed before, there's no intent to change the way that we enforce this legislation. It'll still be a complaint-based enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I thought maybe Mr. Rhodes was going to chip in there, but apparently not. Okay, Janine, please call the roll to vote on the amendment.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yes.
Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
and Mr. Blake.
Yes.
2037 has been amended to 2037A. Is there any other discussion before we vote? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yes.
Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
2037A as amended has passed 10-0. Thank you. Okay, next we move on to ordinances on the second reading. There are none. Ordinances on the first reading, 21-01.
Ordinance number 21-01 by Mr. Rath, an ordinance extending the authority of the temporary Board of Zoning District Revision.
And 2101 will be held until our next meeting. Resolutions on the second reading, 21-02.
Resolution number 21-02 by Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contracts subject to the appropriation of funds for various construction projects.
And 21-02 will be held to our next meeting.
Mr. President,
Oh, I'm sorry. It's on the second reading. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong one. Mr. Rath.
thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt 21-02.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 21-02? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes,
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yeah.
Mr. Rath,
Yes,
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
1-02 passes 10-0. Next, on the second reading, we have 21-03.
Resolution number 21-03 by Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing and directing the Director of Public Service to advertise for bids and enter into contract for certain essential supplies for various departments of the City of Newark, Ohio for 2021.
You've heard the second reading of 21-03. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 21-03.
Motion by Mr. Rath,
Second.
second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 21-03? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes,
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee.
Yeah.
Mr. Rath,
Yes,
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
21-03 passes 10-0. Now we go on to resolutions on the first reading, 21-04.
Resolution number 21-04 expedite by Mr. Marmee, a resolution appropriating monies for current expenses of the municipal corporation.
21-04. Mr. Marmee,
Make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on Resolution 2104.
motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmee,
Second.
second by Mr. Bub. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have some items that we have bills that are due, mainly in the sewer department. And we just want to get these out so then we can get the equipment that they're trying to get and also a couple vehicles.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Janine, please call the roll to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes,
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yes.
Mr. Rath,
yes,
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 21-04.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Marmee,
Second.
second by Mr. Bub. Is there any discussion on 21-04? Seeing none, Janine, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
yes,
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Labutus,
Yes.
Mr. Lang,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yes.
Mr. Rath,
yes,
Mr. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
21-04 passes 10-0. And that will conclude our legislation this evening. Thank you. Next, we have our second opportunity for comments from citizens. Again, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. If you'll just turn your video on and give me a minute, we'll start with Mrs. Smith here in just a moment. Anyone else like to turn your video on? Okay, Mrs. Smith, you can start.
Okay, Rochelle Volin Smith at 237 Violet Court. Two items. One is on the top of the signs. I see that in the ordinance it forbids flashing and blinking signs, basically flashing lights. But I think moving signs, the way a lot of them changed their advertising throughout, is as distracting as blinking lights, and it's likely to cause an accident. And I think that needs to be considered. The other thing is I was curious as to where the funding for the administration building changes is coming from.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe and Mr. Rhodes, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the funding is coming from is COVID funding, I believe, to change the way council chambers is set up. I think Mayor Hall may have something to say about that in miscellaneous.
Hey, Don, that is correct.
Thank you,
That
Mr.
is correct.
Rhodes. It is COVID funding. Anyone else? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Stephen Smith at 237 Violet Court, Newark, Ohio. I just wanted to piggyback on Daniel's comments about sidewalks earlier. This is a topic that I've brought up myself a few times during my tenure of attending council meetings. The example that I've given before, which I think is still a problem, is on Reddington Road near the apartments by the park there. There's a situation where there's a bus stop there. There's no sidewalks in that area. The children have to wait in snowy weather, where the snow plows have plowed a big wedge of snow right where they would wait, and they end up either having to go through a big deep snowdrift or walk in the street. I think this is a public safety issue, and I know the funding is always going to be a problem, but I think, as we saw, tragic results can happen when the safety issues are not taken care of. The playground is right there. I think it's an accident waiting to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else? Do we have any city officials this evening? Our Honorable Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will pass.
Thank you, Director Sassen. Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Don. I'll go ahead and pass tonight also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Bubb.
I will pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bubb. Mr. Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will also pass.
Ms. Hall.
Thank you. I will pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just want to remind everybody today starts Black History Month. I'm sure there's going to be a few things going on around the city, and I encourage you to research different names of African Americans that's invented a lot of nice stuff that we enjoy today. And with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Labutus.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to thank Service Director Rhodes and all of those that are out there keeping our roadways safe and getting the salt down with snow and ice coming. So I appreciate that. And with that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. Mr. Lang.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, Rochelle, I guess I'll just address your comments about the sign legislation. Wanted to clarify that we were really only talking about temporary sign legislation, so this didn't affect any of the digital billboards that I think is what you're referencing in your comments there. But I would like to thank my colleagues for working with me to get that passed. You know, anytime we've got legislation on the books that we're told can't enforce, it's always great to clean that up so that we've got legislation that we can actually enforce. Daniel and Stephen, thank you for your comments about the importance of pedestrian walkways. I'm continuing to work with Spencer and I continue to work with the administration. I'm hopeful that we can get some dedicated funds set aside just for making some improvements to our pedestrian walkways. There's obviously a ton of areas in the city that can use them, and hopefully we can start addressing some of those if we can get some dedicated funds. So thank you for your comments and continue to bring that to light. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to call a personnel committee meeting and a finance committee meeting. I also want to thank Director Rhodes and all the folks that have been working numerous hours from the weekend and continuing on even this evening, making our roadways safe and doing a superior job there. And I just want to thank them. I also want to piggyback on the sidewalk comments. Hopefully you're going to see here in a couple weeks some legislation come through where there is going to be dedicated funding. We're working through the process of that to making sure that there is some funding for sidewalks. And so hopefully that'll come out in either 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but you should be seeing it very soon. So with that, I pass.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Mr. Rath.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call a service committee meeting for 2 weeks and finance committee meeting in 2 weeks. I think Mr. Marmee forgot to do that. But I had a couple other things I wanted to say, and I forget what they were. Oh, yeah, definitely thank you to all the road warriors that are out there. Most of them through the night plowing our roads. They've done a great job. I certainly appreciate all their efforts. All the pre-treating that was done prior to the snowfall, certainly appreciate that as well. I know we have more snow coming, so they'll be out there. Everybody can remember to get your cars off the streets if it's at all possible. It makes the job a whole lot easier and makes the road clearing a lot better for everybody else. Also, not to be caught unaware, I know last year there were some warming rooms that had been opened up during the winter months. And I know that starting next week, we're supposed to have some significantly colder temperatures. Actually, I think I heard the weatherman say tonight, coldest weather we've had in 10 years. So single digit highs, negative temperatures for lows. So hopefully we'll get some people in the community to reinstitute the warming centers and get some of those people taken care of. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Mr. Barker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will pass this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. And Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is the first day of Black History Month, and so I would invite all of my colleagues here on the Zoom tonight to participate in some of the speakers series that the NAACP has organized. You can find all the details at the Licking County NAACP.org. Each and every one of you are welcome to attend. These events have been happening on Wednesdays, and so look forward to seeing one or two of you, or quite a few of you, on some of those calls to celebrate the month that we're in. The next item I wanted to bring up was, many of you may have known Ray Kress. He was a principal. I had him when I was at Lincoln Middle School. He was my middle school principal, and he recently passed away. And I just want to publicly acknowledge Ray Kress and all the years of service that he gave to students and families here in our community, and just lift his family and all his loved ones up in prayer tonight, just due to his recent passing. With that, I'll yield. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Yes, I would agree. Ray was certainly, he was a great guy. I think back when I was at Lincoln, he was the gym teacher there. I think it was his first or second year. So that, never mind about the rest of that. Okay. I would again just like to add my thanks to the street crew, except for the guy that does Sharon Valley Road. After I just got my driveway completely out there shoveled, he came through and plowed me back in. But that's just the way it goes. But yes, thanks to you guys. You guys are doing a great job on, and I know it's tough when it continues to snow and you just get things cleared off and then it snows again. So we sure appreciate it. So if you'll hang in there, that's great. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 16th, because the 15th will be a holiday, I believe. And so it will be 5:45 for committees and 7 o'clock for our full council meeting. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Labutus, second by Mr. Harris. All those in favor signify by saying aye or thumbs up. I'm sorry. Opposed, same sign.